They capture data using magnetic technology. And we have examples of those. We had gone through them before. This is just a way of preparing ourselves for the next few topics. We have magnetic ink character recognition. We have magnetic stripe recognition, and we have the examples. Some of you are familiar with those examples. And then we have speech recognition. Those are scanners. Up to that point, we have the scanners. And then still,
Excuse me.
Yes.
Teacher, we don't have stripe recognition in our notes.
Pardon?
We don't have magnetic stripe recognition in our notes.
We don't have stripe recognition.
Yes, in our
now
notes.
You can see what we have. I can explain them to you. What we mean.
Okay.
So,
okay.
It is there on your board, isn't it?
Yeah.
The
Excuse me, sir. Please go slow when you are explaining. I'm not getting it well when you go fast.
Yes. Fast.
Yes, I'll listen.
Okay, go slowly. Often found at the back of a plastic card. I can give you an example. Some of you are familiar with these examples. Can you be able to see me?
Yes.
Can you recognize this type of card? Yes? What is it? What is this card here?
Sure, we can't see you.
We can't see you, man.
You can't see me?
Yes.
Neither the card.
I'm not visible.
Some can see you.
Card.
Visa.
You cannot see the card.
Visa.
This one. That's how.
Visa card.
Which examples, other devices or device like this do you have? Do you know? We have ATM cards and others, isn't it? Now, behind it, you can see a black stripe. This black stripe here holds a lot of information about the owner and his account. This works only on transactions, financial transactions with banks. So the bank can read the owner details, the account, the balances, and any other transaction they need to know. This information is held with this stripe. That's why we call magnetic stripe. Are we together? If you don't need your mic to ask questions, please mute yourself as we continue. Now, that is magnetic stripe recognition. Examples here you are given is automated teller machine or ATM card. We have Visa card, as somebody rightly stated, and many others. Those are scanners. And then, still on input devices, we have speech recognition and voice input devices. Speech recognition and voice input devices. They capture data into the computer system in form of speech produced by a human. Speech is made of words and they are captured and they are transformed into bits, and those bits are stored inside a computer system. Every data, that's one thing on every input devices have you learned. When data is captured and then from the human sensible type, the ones we know, like inscription on your keyboard, if it's a keying device, like the voice and words we speak, those are human sensible way, and then they are transformed into computer sensible data in form of 0 and 1s.
Wow.
We call them bits. And then they are stored in the storage using in the form of bits. That's how. So when you come to voice, voice is captured into the computer system using a microphone. The microphone, the words are captured and then they are transformed into bits and then they are stored. And then after that, you have touch screens, a device, examples of device which capture a voice is a microphone. It's made in such a way that it captures the vibration in the air and the way it is used with all its form into bits and then it's stored into the computer system. Please mute yourself. Whoever is not muted. And then we have touch screens and digitizers camera, digital cameras. Touch screens and digital cameras. Can you be able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
It's okay, Scott. Yes. You are good representatives. Now, these are also input devices which utilizes a technology of touch-sensitive screens to enter data into the computer systems. The computer detects the position of the finger and responds accordingly. Accordingly is you, the person, the way you want to take your finger, trying to demonstrate or to represent a character on the screen, it will appear that way. So the touch sensitive area will capture and trace the movement of your finger and represent that on the screen. That's the work of touch screen. And you people are familiar with so many of such devices in many areas. The example given here, they are used in banking halls, in hotels, in airports, to provide guidance, information, and etc. Touch screens. Then we have digitizers. Sometimes they are known as graphic
Teacher, we can't hear you.
Teacher, we can't hear you.
Teacher, we can't hear you.
How we can't hear?
I'm just seeing arrows pointing at the screen, but no one is speaking.
Indeed.
We can't hear you.
Teacher, we
You
can't
have
hear you.
muted yourself, teacher. We can't hear you.
Teacher, are you there?
Hello.
Only the arrow is moving. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Continue.
Yes.
So if you are in a noisy background, please ensure your environment is very, very quiet.
Yes.
Okay, we are back. We are saying digitizers, or otherwise known as graphic tablets, they are almost similar to a light pen, but instead it has a graphic tablet on which user writes on using a device similar to a pen, otherwise known as stylus.
Oh.
Yes. We have several gadgets which uses the same technology. Some of you are familiar with those gadgets. Some of you have made tablets before and you know how they are used. We have phones which also use a pen-like devices where you can even sign your letter on it. You can sign and you write on it. They are in this group of input devices. Then we have digital cameras. Digital cameras are very common nowadays. And store the same image in form of 0 and 1s. We call that one digital form. That's why they are called digital cameras. Unlike the old type of cameras, which used a film reel. Yes, a film reel, which was very analog in nature. And for you to produce a graphic or a picture, it has to be taken somewhere else for it to undergo a certain process for you to see a picture. But when you come to digital camera, once you have your image taken, you only connect it directly into the computer, and there you are. You have your graphic or image, and you can be able to manipulate that graphic the way you want to an extent of printing it. Those are digital cameras. You're familiar with them. And then the same in digital cameras, we have those which take moving pictures and which take still pictures. Yes, we call those ones videos, while the other one are still pictures. That gives us an idea of the input, what computer input and the input devices used to enter data into our computer systems. Has it been a good summary?
Yes.
A good summary.
Yes.
Now,
It's okay.
okay now. Where I want us to go slowly by slowly is the second part of the hardware, away from the input devices. And in summary, before I leave that subtopic, Input devices can be classified into one, keying devices, number one. Number two, we have pointing devices. Number three, we have scanners. Number four, we have speech recognition and voice input devices. And then lastly, number five, we have touch screen and digital cameras. Those 5 categories. And the 5 categories are gotten the way they are gotten, the way they capture the type of data they capture into the computer systems. A keyboard cannot be used as a scanner, although both of them can be used to capture different type of data into the computer system. A pointing devices cannot be used as a touch screen. Different devices use different type of data which is acceptable to the system. That's why they are categorized into that. The second part of hardware is the central processing unit, CPU. CPU is also known as a processor and is a very important device when you come to a computer system. And without the CPU, a computer cannot be a computer. You remember when you are doing the history of the computer became a computer because of only that one device called the CPU. All others are not as important. The CPU, known as sometimes the brain of the computer, is what made the computer evolve from one generation to the other, from the first generation to the 5th generation, as you know them, because of the involvement of the CPU. So, how does the CPU work? The CPU it has 3 parts. One, it has a part called ALU. It has another part called CU. ALU stands for Arithmetic and Logic Unit. The other one, CU, stands for Control Unit. And the third part of the CPU
Pardon, please.
is main memory. Yes?
Pardon,
Yes?
please.
Yes?
I didn't hear the AMU clearly.
ALU, Arithmetic Logic Unit. That stands for Arithmetic Logic Unit. CU stands from Control Unit, and the other part is the main memory. This summarizes parts of the processor. All those 3 parts work together for the computer to do what it's supposed to do, especially as far as processing is concerned. Now, let us look at ALU. ALU its function is to handle and manipulate data according to given instruction. Data is data and has no meaning. But the way that data is manipulated makes data to be information at the end of it, as we are going to see as output. That's how. So data and instructions, when data are taken into ALU, they are given instructions from the CU what to do with this data. ALU stands from Arithmetic and Logic Unit. All arithmetic operations And all logic operations are done here on the particular data. Arithmetic, as you know, includes such arithmetic operations as subtraction, multiplication, division, and any other. Logic operations is where a computer is able to compare two quantities or two values and determine either the great or the lesser part. Are we together? And the computer works like that. That's why it's called a computer. Now, control units, on the other hand, coordinates all processing activities in the CPU. All processing activities in the CPU, as well as input, storage, and output devices. It controls all those devices which make a computer. That's the work of control unit. It determines the instructions to be given. It determines the extent and the sequence of these instructions in the computer. That is a control unit. And it does that using system clock. The system clock, as we had seen earlier, sends electric signals as its means of communication. And then these electric signals are the ones which carry a particular instruction into a particular part of the computer. Maybe the input device, it can be the output devices, or the CPU itself, so that that part of the computer can be able to act accordingly. And then we have the main memory. That's the third part of the CPU, main memory. Main memory is a temporary storage area where data is held awaiting further instructions, and to work directly with the CPU. So this main memory is divided into two. We have read-only memory, and we have random access memory. If you can start with read-only memory, it has its own characteristics. The types of read-only memory, depending on the permanency of data or the permanency of what is stored. That's why we have mask read-only memory. We have programmable read-only memory, in short called PROM. We have EEPROM, erasable, programmable, read-only memory. Then the last part, electrically erasable, programmable, read-only memory. All those are classified like this according to how permanent they can be able to store data. Mark you, the data stored in ROM is a kind of permanent compared with RAM. The data cannot be changed easily. It can only be read by the machine, the computer, and you act on the data you read. This data may be in form of instructions. The instructions are only read, but you carry the instruction, whoever reads it. So different parts of the computer read depending with whatever data is stored and cannot be changed, and then act accordingly. Characteristics of ROM, we have, it can only be read and you cannot write on it, cannot be altered easily. We have among the 4 of them up there which can be altered. But here the term is easily. There are ways of altering data, but not as easy as the data stored in RAM. RAM, you can edit that data. Editing means erasing and changing that data, the format you want. That is not possible with ROM stored data. That's how. That's the point number 1. Number 2, it's non-volatile. Volatile here means when power goes, the data still remains. As you will see among the RAM, data, when power goes, that data continue the way it is. The content remain. And then it stores permanent or semi-permanent instructions from the manufacturer. These permanent instructions are stored in firmware. We are going to see this as we continue when you come to operating system. Now, let us go to ROM. We are going to finish up with RAM. RAM, on the other hand, is the most common type, is the biggest. If you compare ROM and RAM, RAM is the biggest and is also known as random access memory. As compared with ROM, the data can be read regardless of the sequence. When you talk of random, it means there is no any order in which this data is stored in its storage area. It can be read randomly. This data is also more temporary, and this data is lost when power is off. These characteristics, you are going to see them down here, so we don't have to repeat them. Types of RAM, there are 2 types, static and dynamic RAM. Static and dynamic RAM. Static is very fast. These are some of the characteristics you might be asked of giving characteristic of static memory or comparing static memory and dynamic memory. These are some of the points you point out immediately. 1, static is faster. Static is very fast compared to dynamic. Number 2, it holds content longer compared to dynamic RAM. And then on the other hand, its content is short-lived. It's not short-lived compared with dynamic. Those are some of the characteristics you're going to find as you cover this area. I know you have gone through them. Dynamic is the opposite. Now, here we have special purpose memories. These special purpose memories work directly with the CPU. We have seen these memories up there. Special purpose memory work together. I mean, they have the same characteristics as those we have seen there. Now, they work directly with the CPU. For CPU, as we know it, is a very, very fast gadget, very fast device. Being very fast, it's working on the data given from the input devices, as we have seen. This data, once it enters into the computer system, it is stored somewhere. And there are 2 areas, as we have seen, where data can be stored, either in a temporary manner or in a more permanent manner. More permanent manner, we call that one auxiliary storage. Auxiliary storage, while, or secondary storage, while primary storage is what we have been discussing, which we call primary storage, which we call main memory. Main memory stores data only for a short time, and this data is the one which is needed by the CPU at that particular time. If this data is not needed by the CPU, it is stored to the more permanent storage. We call that one secondary storage. Now, for CPU to work, it works with data and instruction. Now, to get this data, it can only be gotten from those two areas: main memory, which is next or within the CPU, or secondary storage, which is a bit far. Now, to access this data from secondary storage, transfer this data from the secondary to the memory, and from memory to the ALU, of course, with the instruction from CU. There is quite a number of time which is lost. Access time, data transfer time is long. That means for a CPU to work optimally, it needs more special and very fast memories like CPU itself, which work together to hold data, transfer data very fast to the CPU and back to some kind of memory. That speed is enhanced by these special purpose memory. That's the work to help the CPU work to its capacity by giving it the data it wants and giving out the data which is already done so that the CPU can continue with the same speed. Otherwise, secondary storage, the speed accessing data in the storage area and transferring this data takes so much. Are we together? Anybody there?
Yes.
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 Is it understood?
Yes.
Yeah, we are
Yes.
together.
We are together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Roger that.
Okay.
Together.
Sawa.
Yes.
Join.
This is why
Sawa sawa.
special purpose
Yes,
memories
yeah.
are with us. That's how. Now, they are divided into three types.
Get together.
We have buffer, we have registers, and we have cache memory. Buffer, please, those who are talking at the background. Can you mute yourself while speaking? You don't need to hear what you're saying. That's how. Okay, when you come to buffer, this is a temporary holding place that may be part of the CPU or inbuilt on input or output devices. Now, buffer can only be found in the CPU, but mostly on a particular device, input or output. What's the work of that of buffer? Buffer holds a quite amount of data at the same time. For example, the CPU is through with data and transformed data, which is information, and the computer, the control unit may need, or you, the user, you may need to print this data through an output device known as a printer. What happens? The CPU, this mass of data will be placed somewhere else to allow the CPU to continue. If this data is for printing, then the printer will have a buffer temporarily holding it so that it can free the CPU to continue with its other functions. And you know, the speed of the printer and the speed of the processor are totally different. The printer is very, very slow, while the CPU is very, very fast. And the CPU cannot wait for the printer to take all the data with its own speed so that it can continue to another task. So what happens is that the printer has a buffer. That work is placed there. And the more you send print job, it is held in a buffer. So that once you go, you see the print work in a queue. That work is held in a buffer on the printer. That's how. On the other hand, the printer is working on other tasks. That's the work of the buffer. So it's only found in input devices, output devices, but it holds a
If we
big
continue to
mass of
behave
data.
normally, this disease will treat us abnormally.
Okay. When you come to registers, as opposed to buffer, they only hold one piece of data at a time, unlike the buffer, which can hold a mass of data. That's a big difference, which you must have in mind. So it only holds one piece of data at a time, and it's normally inside the CPU. Examples of such registers, we have them here. We have an accumulator. We have instruction register. And what it does, somebody is becoming unruly.
Kali John.
And then we have a storage register.
Fuck you, snitch. Fuck you. Fuck you.
Now, some of you will force me to hold and look for you. You're not helping yourself, neither are you helping any other person. Hold your tongue, please. If you don't feel like participating, you're free to go. So, don't disrupt others. Now, registers, as I said, we have accumulator, we have instruction register, an address register, and also storage register. Their work is specific. An accumulator. This temporarily holds the results of the last processing step. Results of the last processing step of the ALU. Because it's from that the ALU will move to another particular task. Then we have instruction register. Now, apart from the registers, we also have the cache memory. The cache memory, on the other hand,
Acha mimi nimeenda, nimeboeka. Uko na ngwati hapo nyuma hata kunimute patako hii.
now, cache memory, on the other hand, works directly with the CPU. Sorry for that pause. Cache memory works the CPU also. And it's also is made of static RAM. And the purpose of cache memory, on the other hand, it allows processors to access data and instructions even faster. Most computers nowadays will come with different levels and capacity of cache memory. And that's one of the qualities one checks when you go to buy a computer. The amount it has so that you can be able to make your computer faster. I think I'll stop there. In our next class, we are going also to go in a summary manner, look at the functional organization of the CPU in a simplest form. Your books have a very complicated diagram, but it's important for you to have it from the simplest way so that you understand even that complicated way how it works. Once you understand how it works, you can interpret it very easily. I think that's where we stop, so that we can begin from there in our next class. Do we have any observation, any question, so that we can move to the next class when time comes? Anybody with questions? Some of you.
Thank you, sir.
Raise your hand if you have a question. Any question? Can't see anybody with a question. Okay, have a nice time. Meet next week at the same time.
You too.